Hello, I am Raymond Shadow. Imagine this. Close your eyes. A city that never sleeps. The neon lights are replaced by large red lanterns. Although there are no skyscrapers, the scent permeating the air is no different from Wall Street. It is the smell of fermenting money, mixed with expensive cosmetic powder, alcohol, and rotting human nature. Here, behind every handshake lies a transaction. Behind every flirtation lies a calculation. Does this sound like the set of Succession or the Wolf of Wall Street? But this is not 21st century New York. It is the 16th century. Shandong province, during China's Ming dynasty. Welcome to the world of Jin Ping Mei. The book we are discussing is usually translated in the West as the Golden Lotus. For most people who know of it, it carries a lingering label. A notorious erotic novel. A little yellow book from the East. Many people only know of it through lists of banned books. But I must first shatter this misconception for you. This is like watching all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones solely for the few minutes of nudity, while ignoring the grand power struggles and the abyss of human nature within it. The fact is, if you were to take a calculator and tally it up, in this massive work of 1,000,000 words, the parts that actually describe pornography amount to only about 20,000 words. A ratio of less than 2.5%. And to be honest, even that 2.5% is not written to meet the standards of exciting scenes in pure erotica. It has no romantic filter. It reads like a cold autopsy report. Or low-pixel footage captured by a surveillance camera. Crude, direct, and even capable of inducing physiological discomfort. So, viewing Jin Ping Mei as a pornographic novel is the greatest misunderstanding of it. It is actually the greatest novel of manners in the history of Chinese literature, and the first to be independently created by a single literati. It is a Vanitas of the late Ming dynasty. A void painting in Western art terms. It paints skulls. It paints rotting fruit. It paints candles that are extinguishing. It tells you that all the prosperity you pursue will eventually return to dust. And the author, Lanling Xiaoxiao Sheng, the scoffing scholar of Lanling. This mysterious author, to this day, no one knows who he was. He is like an invisible ghost or an emotionless 4K surveillance camera, hanging coldly from the beams of Ximen Qing's mansion. This is our first key to decoding this book. The cold gaze. If you have read Gustave Flaubert's Madame Bovary or the naturalist novels of Émile Zola, you will understand this perspective. Even when describing the most unbearable incest or the cruelest deaths, the author's pen remains at absolute zero. He does not judge. He does not jump out and say, this person is a villain, or that person is pitiful. He simply shows. This cruel sense of reality is more trembling than any moral sermon. Let's look at the protagonist of this story, Ximen Qing. If he were alive today, he would absolutely be a top-tier influencer on social media. A so-called national husband. What does he look like in the book? The author describes him quite humorously: round head, short neck. A big round head, a very short neck. I couldn't help but laugh when I read this, because the description sounds a bit like a friend of mine. But in that era, this wasn't derogatory. It represented a vigorous, even savage, life force. Through the mouth of the character Wang Po, the book summarizes the standards for a perfect lover or alpha male in that era, or perhaps in all eras of human history. 5 characters. Pan, Liu, Deng, Xiao, Xian. This sounds like a mysterious incantation. Let me decode it for you. Character 1. Pan refers to Pan En, the most beautiful man in ancient China. It means you must have looks. Character 2. Liu refers to donkeys. Specifically, you must have the sexual potency and the equipment of a donkey. Character 3. Deng refers to Deng Tong, a man whose wealth rivaled the state. It means you must have endless money. Character 4. Xiao, this is the most interesting point. It means you must have smallness, you must understand how to please women like a psychologist, have patience, and be willing to humble yourself. Character 5. Xian, you must have idle time. You cannot be a 9-to-5 worker. You need entire days to squander and to accompany others. Ximen Qing is the embodiment of these 5 points. But he is not just a playboy. If we introduce a Western philosophical perspective, Ximen Qing is simply the incarnation of Arthur Schopenhauer's will to life. Schopenhauer said life is a ball of desire. If desire is unsatisfied, there is pain. If satisfied, there is boredom. Life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. But Ximen Qing, he is a man trying to cut the pendulum cord. He refuses boredom. He uses a near-mad energy to fill every single instant. He tirelessly pursues money, pursues women, pursues power. He is like a perpetual motion machine. A beast driven by desire. In the philosophy of Nietzsche, we might mistake him for some kind of Superman. Because he breaks all traditional morals. He does not abide by Confucian rituals. He not only commits adultery, he commits incest. He even manipulates the political arena. He seems to be creating his own values. But here lies a massive irony. The true Superman acts to transcend the self, to create higher meaning. Whereas Ximen Qing, he is more like a mutation of what Nietzsche despised, the last man. A monster with only base physiological needs, yet possessing the mobility of a Superman. All his pursuits ultimately point to nihility. At the beginning of this story, Ximen Qing is actually not that rich. He is just a fallen household owner running a raw medicine shop. Like a small boss in the early stages of a startup. The history of his rise is a textbook filled with the stench of blood and copper. This is not just a story about a man. It is a story about an era. The late Ming dynasty. That was a very special period in Chinese history. If you had visited Europe in that era, you would find that, just like there, the sprouts of capitalism were breaking through the soil. Traditional feudal morality was disintegrating. Money became the new god. When I was a child, I read this book secretly, just like all children of that generation, with the excitement of seeking the forbidden. At that time, our environment was closed off, much like Victorian England. Even seeing a hint of a girl's bra strap through her shirt in summer would make one's heart race. So, in that repressed environment, Ximen Qing's life was simply an alien civilization. A thorough, unscrupulous indulgence. But as I grew older, read more books, met more people, and especially after I found myself in this Vanity Fair, looking back at Ximen Qing, I no longer see pornography. I see fear. I see a soul swallowed by desire. In that small town named Qinghe County, which actually mirrors the world's most bustling trade centers of that time, we can view it as the Paris of that era. On this stage, Ximen Qing is about to begin his performance. A grand show regarding money, power, and flesh. And the base color of this performance is utter desolation. Before this feast begins, we need to understand. Ximen Qing's tragedy is not because he is too evil. It is because he is too real. He is that beast trapped by chains deep within each of us. If you were placed in that late Ming dynasty, where there were no legal constraints and money could buy everything, can you guarantee that you wouldn't become the next Ximen Qing? Money, the logic of gold. If today you open the Forbes list, you will see all kinds of tech tycoons. But in the Ming dynasty, in that Eastern Empire where capitalism was just budding, the accumulation of wealth was more primitive, more bloody, and more direct. Ximen Qing was not born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Although he was later called Grand Official Ximen, at the start of the story, he was actually a decline. A typical nouveau riche. He ran a raw medicine shop. In that strictly hierarchical society, his status was actually not high. One could even say he was at the bottom of the food chain. But he possessed the key to open the door of wealth. That is the absolute moral nihilism we mentioned earlier. Ximen Qing's history of making his fortune, if summarized in the language of modern business textbooks, is a textbook-level merger and reorganization. Only, the objects of his mergers were widows. Mergers and acquisitions of widows. This sounds cruel, but this is exactly the fact recorded by the author's cold gaze. He didn't write about how Ximen Qing loved these women. He wrote about the balance sheet. His first pot of gold came from Meng Yulo. Meng Yulo was the widow of a cloth merchant. Although she was older than Ximen Qing, and even older than the other concubines, in Ximen Qing's eyes, she represented liquid cash flow. The book lists her dowry inventory in detail. This style of writing is very unique. The author acts like a warehouse keeper or an auditor. He records not only the 1,000+ tales of silver she brought but also the bolts of cloth, jewelry, and the detail that impressed me the most. 2 Nanjing bamboo beds, Nanjing inlaid canopy beds. This kind of bed was the Hermes of luxury goods at the time. Carved beams and painted rafters, invaluable. When Ximen Qing heard about this property, the light in his eyes was definitely brighter than when he saw Meng Yulo herself. In this process, there is a scene written with extreme irony. Meng Yulo's uncle wanted to fight for this property, while her aunt was bribed by Ximen Qing to speak in his favor. The two groups fought inextricably, cursing each other, even using walking sticks as weapons. And Ximen Qing? Taking advantage of the chaos, he commanded a group of porters to move those 2 big beds and those chests of cloth back to his own home, moving them like spoils of war in a grand procession. At this moment, all kinship, ethics, and morality vanished into nothingness before the jingling silver. If Meng Yulo was just the first pot of gold, then Li Ping'e was simply Ximen Qing's lottery win. The jackpot. Who is Li Ping'e? She was the wife of Ximen Qing's sworn brother, Hua Zishu. Does this sound familiar? Do not covet a friend's wife. But in Ximen Qing's logic, friend's wife, help yourself. Li Ping'e's source of wealth was even more astonishing. She used to be the concubine of Liang Zhongshu. And Liang Zhongshu was the son-in-law of the then Prime Minister, Cai Jing. When Liang Zhongshu's mansion was stormed and occupied by rebel forces, Li Ping'e escaped in the chaos. What did she take? She took 100 large Western pearls and various python robes and jade belts from the imperial palace. Every item was stained with the bloody smell of power. Li Ping'e lived next door to Ximen Qing. To facilitate their affair, and to facilitate the transfer of assets, they actually knocked a hole in the wall between the two houses. This is not just a physical hole. It is a symbol. It symbolizes that the moral defense line of that era was already as fragile as that wall. Through this hole, Li Ping'e moved chests of gold, silver, and treasures into Ximen Qing's house like an ant moving home. A full 3,000 taels of silver. In that era, 1 tael of silver was roughly equivalent to 1,000 renminbi today. That means it was a full 3 million in cash. And that's not counting those priceless jewels. Karl Marx once said that money is the alienation of human labor. It turns relationships between people into relationships between things. In the story of Ximen Qing and Li Ping'e, this is demonstrated vividly. Did Ximen Qing love Li Ping'e? Later, perhaps, there was a little truth to it. But in the beginning, it was just a naked wealth transfer. As Ximen Qing watched those chests being transported through the wall hole, his pleasure might have been more intense than what he obtained in bed. But this is not just a story about greed. It is a story about economic history. The Qinghe County where Ximen Qing lived actually mirrors Linqing, Shandong Province, China. In the Ming Dynasty, this place was equivalent to the Suez Canal or the Panama Canal checkpoint today. It was the heart of the Grand Canal. The economic lifeline of the Ming Dynasty was tied to this place. Southern silk, tea, porcelain. Northern furs. Everything had to pass through here. Here was China's largest customs house, the Tax Bureau. The silver flowing here every day was an astronomical figure. Lanling Xiaoxiao Sheng, this 4K camera, accurately captured the pulse of this era. He wrote about how Ximen Qing used this geographical location to complete the leap from commercial capital to bureaucratic capital. There is a crucial plot point here, Ximen Qing's collusion with Cai Zhuangyuan. Cai Zhuangyuan later became the imperial censor of the Lianghuai salt administration. In ancient China, salt was a state monopoly, just like oil or tobacco today. Whoever controlled the salt ticket controlled the code to profiteering. The Ming Dynasty had a system called the Kaizhong method. Merchants transported grain to the border, and the government gave you salt tickets as payment. But by the late Ming, this system had collapsed, turning into a pure financial speculation game. Using his relationship with Cai Zhuangyuan, Ximen Qing obtained 30,000 salt tickets in advance. This transaction instantly netted him tens of thousands of taels of silver. In modern financial terms, this was a perfect insider trading. No risk. Only exorbitant profit. It was this money that allowed him to open the county's largest silk shop, transforming him from a small raw medicine shop owner into a tycoon controlling the local economic lifeline. With money, the next step naturally is power. The logic of power. In Jin Ping Mei, official positions also have a clear price tag. Ximen Qing bought an official title called Vice Commander of the Golden Guard. This was originally a hollow military title. But through bribery, through gift-giving, he turned this hollow title into real power. He became the magistrate of the criminal tribunal, equivalent to being the deputy chief of police and the deputy president of the court today. This is absolutely absurd. A hooligan who started his career through illegal means has now become the person maintaining the law. The Joker became Batman, but a corrupt version. There is a detail in the book written excellently. After becoming an official, Ximen Qing put on an official robe embroidered with a lion. In the Ming dynasty's ritual system, the lion pattern could only be worn by officials of the first or second rank. He, a small fifth-rank official, dared to wear a lion. What does this mean? It means the collapse of moral decay. It means money has overridden imperial power and ritual systems. When people saw him wearing this clothes, no one reported his violation. Instead, there was a chorus of compliments. Because he had money. Because he had power. German philosopher George Simmel, in his magnum opus The Philosophy of Money, mentioned that money is a universal equivalent. It levels all qualitative differences, leaving only quantitative differences. In Ximen Qing's world, everything can be quantified. A woman's chastity can be quantified into silver. An official's conscience can be quantified into silver. Even human life can be quantified into silver. When he beat someone to death, or his subordinates broke the law, he just needed to take out silver, bribe the ups and downs, and it was as if nothing happened. This kind of description, this completely emotionless, ledger-like recording, is exactly what makes Jin Ping Mei most terrifying. The author does not jump out to condemn Ximen Qing's corruption. He just coldly watches. Watching silver flow in and out like water. Watching power being bought and sold like a commodity. This detached perspective, this ruthless realism, forces us to face a fact. To what extent can humans be alienated under the logic of money? Ximen Qing's circle of friends is also a product of money logic. There is an important supporting character named Ying Boju. He is like Ximen Qing's shadow. A sponger, a parasite. He lives by flattering Ximen Qing. If Ximen Qing farts, he can smell a fragrance in it. He pimps for Ximen Qing. He handles dirty work for Ximen Qing. In front of Ximen Qing, he acts closer than a blood brother. But as long as Ximen Qing is not present, or after Ximen Qing dies, he runs faster than anyone. This interpersonal relationship is entirely built on the foundation of money. It is fragile. It is hypocritical. But it is also extremely stable. As long as Ximen Qing has money, Ying Boju is the most loyal dog. We have witnessed how Ximen Qing used money and power to build that magnificent commercial empire. But if the commercial world on the front stage is a man's battlefield, full of smoke and calculation, then the backyard of the Ximen mansion is a women's Asura Realm battlefield. There is no open robbery with torches and weapons here. There are no sweeping movements like in the officialdom. But every inch of air here is filled with deadly poison. The war here is silent. It is about a look in the eyes. About a pair of shoes. About a cat. Even about the cry of an infant. If we are to use a modern Western concept to define this backyard, I would not hesitate to quote Michel Foucault. In his classic work Discipline and Punish, he mentioned that concept. The Panopticon. Ximen Qing's home appears on the surface to be a magnificent Garden of Eden. In reality, it is a perfect circular prison. Ximen Qing is the jailer in the central watchtower. He controls all resources, all favor, all power over life and death. And his wives and concubines, Wu Yuanyang, Li Jiaoa, Meng Yulo, Sun Shui, Pan Jinlian, Li Pinga, plus that Peng Chonmei. They are both prisoners and jailers monitoring each other. In this closed system, power does not flow strictly from top to bottom. Foucault said power is microphysics. It permeates every capillary. In the Ximen mansion, power manifests as, who gets to sleep with him tonight? Who gets a fur coat? Who gets to own a Nanjing canopy bed? To fight for these pitiful resources, these women burst forth with an astonishing, even terrifying, life force. The two most dazzling protagonists among them are undoubtedly Pan Jinlian and Li Pinga. They are two sides of a coin. The extreme opposition of fire and water. Pan Jinlian versus Li Pinga. Let's talk about Pan Jinlian first. In pop culture, she is synonymous with a slut. But under the author's pen, she is a rebel with tragic colors. If we put her in today's context, she might be a gold digger from the bottom rung who is extremely insecure but desperately eager to climb up. Or a dark lotus who is decisive and ruthless in the workplace. Pan Jinlian's origin is extremely low. She was a tailor's daughter, sold into the Wang Jiaoxin household to learn arts, then sold to Zhong Dahu, and finally given to Wu Dalong. Her life is like an object being constantly transferred. Simone de Beauvoir said in The Second Sex, one is not born, but rather becomes, a woman. Pan Jinlian was molded by that patriarchal society, that cruel system, bit by bit into a monster. She learned to use her body as a weapon because that was the only capital she possessed. She learned to use vicious language as a shield because if she didn't attack, she would be swallowed whole. Among the 6 wives in the Ximen mansion, Pan Jinlian is the poorest. Meng Yulo has the inheritance of the cloth shop. Li Ping'e has eunuch who has treasures. Even Li Jiaoa has the huge entertainment industry of Lichuan courtyard backing her. Only Pan Jinlian, except for that Wu Dalong killed by Wu Song, she has nothing. She must live by fighting. Every time she throws a tantrum, every time she sows discord, even every act of seemingly crazy sex. Essentially, it is for survival. Existence precedes essence. Sartre's words find their darkest verification in her. She must first establish her sense of existence, no matter how evil that existence is. In sharp contrast to her is Li Ping'e. She is the only woman in the book who brought Ximen Qing true wealth and even a trace of warmth. She has fair skin, a gentle personality, and money in hand. She married over with half the national treasury. What did she want? She wanted merely a stable home, a husband who loved her, and a child. She naively thought, as long as I have money, as long as I endure, I can survive in this Asura Realm. But she was wrong. In this Panopticon, kindness is an original sin. Because kindness means weakness. It means being bullyable. Pan Jinlian looked at Li Ping'e like a hungry wolf looking at a fat sheep. Pan Jinlian hated Li Ping'e not only because Li Ping'e had money but because Li Ping'e took away Ximen Qing's only bit of genuine heart. This aroused the most primitive jealousy and fear deep in Pan Jinlian's heart. This brings us to that spine-chilling prop. The snow lion. This was a cat raised by Pan Jinlian. Pure white, extremely beautiful. But under the writer's cold gaze sketch, this cat became an extension of Pan Jinlian's will. It became a biological weapon in her hands. Because Li Ping'e gave birth to a son named Guanjia. This child was Ximen Qing's lifeblood and the foundation of Li Ping'e standing in the Ximen mansion. Pan Jinlian herself had an abortion, she had no children and could no longer bear children. So she had to remove this threat. The description of this part in the book is simply horror movie level. Pan Jinlian did not go and strangle the child directly. That would be too low class. She trained this cat. How did she train it? She wrapped red meat in red cloth and let the cat pounce on and bite that red cloth bundle every day. She conditioned the cat to pounce and bite whenever it saw something red. And that infant, Guanjia, usually wore a red belly band. What a precise, what a venomous psychological experiment. This is exactly the discipline Foucault spoke of, only used for slaughter. Finally, one day, when the infant was playing on the heated bed wearing a red belly band, that snow lion pounced like a white bolt of lightning. The cat thought it was the meat it ate every day. It frantically scratched and bit the child. Although the infant was not bitten to death on the spot, he was literally scared into illness. In the end, he died prematurely in terror. The author's description here, the cold gaze, works again. He didn't use any exclamation marks. He didn't say how cruel Pan Jinlian was. He simply objectively recorded the cat's movements, the infant's scream, Li Ping'e's heart-wrenching crying. And Pan Jinlian standing aside, with that expression of seeming innocence, but with a hint of a sneer at the corner of her mouth. This impassive cruelty sends more chills down the spine than direct gore. It tells you that in this home, nothing is safe. Even a pet can be a murder weapon. Besides the cat, there are shoes. In that era, bound feet were a symbol of female charm and also a mark of their confinement. Pan Jinlian, her name implies Golden Lotus, meaning she has a pair of perfect small feet. In the book, she often spends enormous energy on those shoes, only 3 inches long. She uses red shoes embroidered with green flowers. This bright, teasing color combination is her combat boot. Once, to show off her charm to Ximen Qing, she deliberately lost a shoe for him to find. And when abusing Yinge, the daughter of Wu Dalong's ex-wife, she used those sharp little feet to kick the child's face. These feet were both tools to please men and weapons to trample the weak. The outcome of this struggle was tragic. Guan Jie died. Li Ping'e, due to excessive grief and the recurrence of a previous gynecological illness, also died in endless pain. The death of Li Ping'e is a turning point in the whole book. It is also the only moment where the character Ximen Qing shows some humanity. We always say Ximen Qing is a cold-blooded animal, a walking reproductive organ. But when Li Ping'e died, he cried. And he wailed loudly. Even after Li Ping'e died, he went to hug her cold corpse, disregarding the infection of corpse qi. In that superstitious era, this was very rare. This makes me think that even in the most absurd desert, occasionally a small flower stained with blood will bloom. Ximen Qing's feelings for Li Ping'e might not be pure love. It mixed reliance on wealth, attachment to tenderness, and a latent boredom with his own indulgent life. Li Ping'e was a projection of normal life deep in his heart. Li Ping'e died, and that illusion shattered. Ximen Qing thoroughly lost a harbor where he could dock. He could only step on the gas pedal to the floor in the fast lane of desire. Until he rushed off the cliff. But, do not think that because Li Ping'e died, Pan Jinlian won. In this zero-sum game, there are no winners. Foucault analyzed in the history of sexuality that in such a power structure, both the oppressor and the oppressed will eventually be swallowed by this twisted relationship. Pan Jinlian got rid of Li Ping'e, but she also lost Ximen Qing's favor. Because when Ximen Qing looked at her, he would think of his dead son and wife. Pan Jinlian became increasingly crazy. She began an incestuous affair with her son-in-law, Chen Jingji. She sank deeper and deeper into the quagmire of desire. The more vigorous her life force, the faster her destruction came. The struggle in Jin Ping Mei is an existential despair. They fight because they have nothing to do. Because they are trapped in this cage. Just as Beauvoir said, they were deprived of transcendence and could only rot in immanence. They wasted all their wisdom, all their energy, on that tiny patch of land. Wasted on trivialities like how to train a cat, how to embroider a pair of shoes, how to drug others. This is a massive waste of life force. This is a suffocating tragedy. It is like a gladiator performance with no audience. The gladiators kill each other in the arena, dripping with blood. And Ximen Qing, the sole audience member, is actually walking toward the seat of death himself. In this Asura realm within a vase, the flowers are watered with blood. And the vase itself is already covered in cracks. When we gaze at Li Ping'e's cold corpse and Pan Jinlian's eyes filled with spite, we cannot help but ask. How long must this endless internal friction, this state of existence that alienates humans into beasts, continue? And Ximen Qing, who seemingly controls everything, how will he face the massive void inside him after losing Li Ping'e? He chose the most direct, and also the deadliest way. That is a carnival of the flesh, even more crazy than before. We must move from the prison of the spirit to the prison of the flesh. We are going to talk about the two most primitive human impulses. Eating and sex. In the world of Jin Ping Mei, these two are not only juxtaposed, they are completely isomorphic. The author uses the same ink, the same fanaticism, and even the same coldness to describe a grand banquet and an intense bed scene. This is the theme we want to explore. The ecstasy and the agony. First, let's look at eating. If you think the rich in ancient China ate as exquisitely as Michelin 3-star restaurants, you are very wrong. Ximen Qing's dining table is a carnival of grease and calories. The book tirelessly lists various dishes: roast duck, stewed pig's head, deep-fried pastries. Every dish glistens with oil. Every bite is full of fat. The food here has no concept of light eating. It is excess. It is squandering. Just as French philosopher Georges Bataille termed expenditure. Bataille believed that the essence of human society is the non-productive consumption of surplus energy. Whether it is war, extravagant banquets, or sex, essentially, it is to excrete surplus energy like garbage. This description of eating is not just to display wealth. It is to metaphorize what is happening in that society. Ximen Qing and his friends gorged themselves at the table. And under the table, they are devouring the flesh and blood of this country like beasts. That wolfing down of food. That vomiting after 3 rounds of drinking. That scene of a messy table. Just like the Mei, plum, in the book title, Peng Chon Mei. Or those flowers that rot quickly after blooming. Implying that all this prosperity is merely flowers of evil blooming on a rotting corpse. Then, let us turn to that more sensitive topic. Sex. This is also the reason this book is labeled yellow. But I must emphasize again, the sex penned by this anonymous great author is absolutely not the kind of sex you see on Pornhub performed to please the audience. It is more like a punishment. A manual labor. Even a cruel circus performance. The most famous example is the notorious grape trellis scene. This is a climax of sexual description in the entire book, and also an extremely absurd moment. Jinlian, this gladiator fighting for survival, has now turned into a monster twisted by desire and jealousy. Under the grape trellis, she demands Ximen Qing treat her in a way that borders on abuse. She even sees this as a proof of love, or a filling of the void after Li Ping's death. And Ximen Qing? At this moment, he is no longer an enjoyer. He is more like a machine that has been wound up. He must rely on a potent aphrodisiac called Hu Seng Yao, monk's medicine, to maintain this high-intensity operation. This medicine was given to him by a mysterious foreign monk. This foreign monk is like a pharmacist from hell. He gave Ximen Qing this medicine and warned him not to use too much. But how could Ximen Qing listen? He treated this medicine as a ticket to eternal happiness. This erection maintained by drugs, this mechanical piston motion with zero emotional exchange. Under the author's cold gaze sketch, it appears both ridiculous and pathetic. It strips away all romance and tenderness from sex, leaving only the mechanics of flesh. Just as Bataille pointed out in erotism, death and sensuality, the extreme of eroticism is death. It is a complete breaking of individual boundaries. It is a little death. And Ximen Qing is walking step by step toward the real big death. Here we must return to that core concept. The cold gaze. This is also the biggest difference between Jin Ping Mei and another Chinese classical masterpiece, Dream of the Red Chamber. Some say Water Margin, Outlaws of the Marsh, is the father, Jin Ping Mei is the mother, and Dream of the Red Chamber is the daughter. This metaphor is very precise, but also very cruel. Water Margin gave Jin Ping Mei the skeleton and characters, the part where Wusong kills his sister-in-law. And Jin Ping Mei gave Dream of the Red Chamber flesh and blood and worldly affairs. Without Jin Ping Mei, there would be no Dream of the Red Chamber. But the personalities of this mother and daughter are completely different. Dream of the Red Chamber is warm empathy. Cao Xueqing is full of infinite pity for the girls under his pen, whether Lin Daiyu or Xue Baochai. He writes them as translucent as crystal. Even death is beautiful. It is cold moon burying the soul of poetry. We must bathe and change clothes, light incense, before reading it. While Jin Ping Mei is cold clinical detachment. Lanling Xiaoxiao Sheng has not a shred of pity for Jinlian or Li Ping. He writes them as bloody as raw meat. Even living is ugly. It is hot blood scalding fresh meat. To read this book, you'd best be eating spicy hot pot, drinking strong liquor, watching the sweat pour down, watching that primitive life force rolling in the pot until it finally boils dry. Dream of the Red Chamber tries to construct a utopia, a grand view garden, keeping those filthy things outside the wall. But in Jin Ping Mei, there are no walls. Or rather, inside the wall is dirtier than outside. The author, like the Marquis de Sade, does not avoid this filth but forces you to look straight at it. Forces you to watch Jinlian twist under the grape trellis. Forces you to see the filth on the bedsheet before Li Ping dies. Forces you to watch Ximen Qing's greed when he swallows that pill. This style of writing did not truly appear in Western literature until 19th century naturalism. Flaubert said, the author, in his work, must be like God in the universe, present everywhere and visible nowhere. Lanling Xiaoxiao Sheng achieved this. He made himself invisible. He leaves us alone to face this naked world. This reading experience is extremely painful. Because we cannot find a sense of superiority in moral judgment. Nor can we find a refuge in romantic fantasy. We can only see ourselves in the mirror. That self full of desire. That greedy self. That self trying to fill the inner void between food and sex. We see how Ximen Qing turned his body into a battlefield. He thought he was conquering women, actually, he was overdrawing his life. He thought he was enjoying ecstasy, actually, he was enduring agony. This pain is not physical pain, but a profound, unspeakable sense of nothingness. The void after the climax. When the banquet disperses. When the drug wears off. When the women sleep in exhaustion. Ximen Qing sits alone on that invaluable Nanjing canopy bed. He looks at the moon outside the window. The moon that shone on Qin Shi Huang and Emperor Wu of Han, that shone on Li Bai and Du Fu. At this moment, it coldly shines on him, a Shandong local tycoon. What would he be thinking? He probably thought nothing. Because thinking is painful. He would only think, what will I eat tomorrow? Who will I sleep with tomorrow? How much money will I earn tomorrow? This absolute attachment to the present, this absolute blindness to the future, is exactly the countdown to his destruction. We have finally arrived here. Into the void. We have seen the high towers built of money. Seen the nets woven by power. Seen the feasts of intertwined flesh. Now it is time to look at the endgame of it all. How did Ximen Qing die? This might be the most absurd, most ironic, and most symbolic ending in the history of Chinese literature. He did not die in a heroic duel. He did not die of political assassination. He didn't even die of some noble disease. He died of overdose. He died of a physiological draining the pond to get all the fish. If you remember that Hussein Yao from the western regions, that pill that allowed him to operate like a machine under the grape trellis. On that final night, Pan Jinlian, this goddess, or witch, driven mad by desire and despair. In order to keep Ximen Qing, in order to achieve final victory in that endless Asura arena, she fed Ximen Qing a massive dose of the medicine. She even poured the remaining dregs in. What was the result? Ximen Qing, this richest man in Shandong. This red-topped merchant with tens of thousands of salt tickets. This national husband with countless women. His body, in that moment, turned into an out-of-control Ferrari. The accelerator was welded to the red line. The engine was injected with an overdose of nitrous oxide. In extreme excitement, he died of ejaculation. Literally. He died of exhaustion. In that moment, all money, all power, all pleasure, could not stop his life force from deflating like a punctured ball. Rapidly withering away. Finally turning into a cold, stiff corpse. Dying in Pan Jinlian's bed. At the age of 33. Yes, exactly the age Jesus was nailed to the cross. But Ximen Qing had no resurrection. And no redemption. Ximen Qing's death is not just the physiological death of a man. It is a massive metaphor. It symbolizes that false prosperity built on external stimulation, on drugs, on money, will inevitably devour itself. This is like the ultimate form of expenditure prophesied by Georges Bataille. Extreme expenditure. If not transformed into production, if not sublimated into spirit, then its only exit is destruction, is death. And after this great tree fell, what happened is more chilling than death itself. This is that famous Chinese idiom. Tree falls, monkeys scatter. Before Ximen Qing died, he was actually very lucid. Even a bit touching. He called his son-in-law Chen Jingji to his bedside. That was his final entrustment. He detailed every account, who owes me how much money, how much the satin shop is worth, how much the raw medicine shop is worth. He not only remembered every number but also showed a rare warmth. He said, after I die, do not separate the family. Everyone must still live together. I lived my whole life for this bit of face. If the family scatters, I will have no face left. This was his final dignity and wish as a patriarch. But reality gave him a resounding slap in the face. The moment he breathed his last, before his bones were even cold, this seemingly stable commercial empire collapsed like dominoes. The speed of the collapse was jaw-dropping. First, those shop assistants and managers he trusted most. Those who usually bowed and scraped to him. Like the one named Lai Bao. He managed the satin shop, Ximen Qing's biggest asset. The moment he heard the boss died, his first reaction was not grief, but to immediately sell off the goods in the shop at low prices, pocket tens of thousands of taels of silver, and run away overnight. In the logic of money, there is no loyalty, only interest. When the financier dies, the contract is void. Then his good brothers. That Ying Boju, the one who spent all day mooching off Ximen Qing and praising him to the skies. After Ximen Qing died, he didn't come to mourn even once. Not only did he not come, but he immediately defected to Ximen Qing's rival, Zhang Erguan. And he used the scandals of Ximen Qing's household as conversation fodder to curry favor with his new master. This is human nature. In the face of profit, it is so naked, so fragile. As for those women, that Asura field in the vase disintegrated instantly. Wu Yuanyang, as the legal wife, as the maintainer of this system, she quickly began to clean house. She sold Pan Jinlian, this disaster who caused her husband's death, at an extremely low price. Sold to whom? Sold to Wu Song. Yes. That hero who beat the tiger. That killing god from water margin. Finally returned. This description is the bloodiest and most fatalistic scene in the entire book. Wu Song pretended he wanted to buy Pan Jinlian to marry her. Pan Jinlian actually believed it. She naively thought she could still conquer this man with her beauty. The result? Wu Song took her before Wu Dalong's spirit tablet, raised his hand and brought the knife down, cut out her heart to offer as a sacrifice to his dead brother. The circle is closed. This blade severed all love and hate, and pulled the story of Jin Ping Mei back into the cruel logic of water margin. And another important woman, Peng Chonmei. She was Pan Jinlian's maid and Ximen Qing's lover. After Ximen Qing died, she showed astonishing backbone. When she was driven out of the house by Wu Yuanyang, she didn't turn her head back, didn't even take a piece of clothing. She said, "I don't care for your family's things." Later, she actually had a turn of fortune, married a garrison commander, and became a noble lady. She even returned one day to the dilapidated Ximen mansion. Looking at the now destitute First Lady Wu Yuanyang, who was once insufferably arrogant, she did not mock. Nor did she take revenge. She just looked coldly. In that look, there was a desolation that saw through the fickleness of the world. This is the ending of Jin Ping Mei. No happy ending. No good is rewarded, evil is punished. Only a vast expanse of whiteness, truly clean. But this cleanliness is not the poetic cleanliness covered by heavy snow in Dream of the Red Chamber. It is the ash left after a fire. It is a thorough, irreversible nothingness. This brings us back to the core theme of this series. Emptiness. Kong. This is also the deeper meaning of the three characters in the title Jin Ping Mei, beyond representing names. Jin, gold represents money. Ping, vase represents wine and sex. Mei, plum represents spring colors, meaning desire. All of this ultimately is empty. The emptiness here is not the despair of Western nihilism, nothing has meaning. Nor is it the anxiety of existentialism, God is dead. It is the sunyata of Buddhist philosophy. Dependent origination and emptiness of nature. It tells you everything you cling to, money, reputation, flesh, emotion, even this self, are all formed by the combination of causes and conditions. They are temporary. They are fluid. Like dew. Like lightning. They cannot last. Lanling Xiaoxiao Sheng, this great author. His cold gaze reached the peak of philosophy here. He did not preach like a priest telling you to be good. Nor did he scold you for doing evil like a moralist. He was simply like Laozi in the Tao Te Ching. Heaven and earth are ruthless, and treat the myriad creatures as straw dogs. Heaven and earth are cold. It does not care about your joys and sorrows. It only cares about laws. Prosperity must decline. Things turn to their opposite when they reach the extreme. This is the law. Ximen Qing's tragedy is not because he was bad, but because he tried to fight against this law. He tried to use a finite body to fill an infinite abyss of desire. He tried to use tangible money to buy intangible time in life. This was destined to be a losing war. Now, let us bring our gaze back from the Ming dynasty. Look at the 21st century today. If you open your Instagram, your TikTok, what do you see? You will see countless low-spec versions of Ximen Qing. You will see countless girls who want to become pan-Jinlian. You will see that fanaticism for luxury goods. That obsession with plastic surgery. That adoration of national husbands. You will see the value system of I'd rather cry in a Ferrari than smile on a bicycle. We mock Ximen Qing's vulgarity. Mock his nouveau riche face. But to be honest, have we really progressed? Jean Baudrillard said in The Consumer Society, "We do not consume objects, but signs." Ximen Qing wearing that official robe embroidered with a lion. And people today wearing a Supreme shirt with a giant logo. Is there any essential difference? It is all to prove I exist. All to make a faint noise in this indifferent universe. Ximen Qing did not die. He lives among us. He even lives in the heart of every one of us. So when we finish reading Jin Ping Mei, when we close this heavy book, we should not feel anger. Nor should we merely feel shame. We should feel a deep compassion. For Ximen Qing. For Pan Jinlian. For Li Ping'er. And for ourselves. Because we are all actors in this absurdist drama. We chase the same phantoms on the same stage. Until the curtain falls. Until the lights go out. Until we, too, return to that endless void. This is Jin Ping Mei. I am Raymond Shadow. If you enjoy this journey of finding light in darkness and truth in decay, please like and subscribe. In this world full of noise, let us stay clear-headed. Keep the cold gaze. I will see you next time.